This week saw Sudan's bloody and devastating civil war enter a third year. A meeting of international leaders in London ending without any agreement on how to even start talking about bringing peace to the African nation. Well, joining me live is Humanitarian Assistance Specialist Sara Sinada. Sara, what's been the international reaction since that London conference ended without any joint declaration whatsoever?
It's been disappointing, to be honest. The fact that such a high-level conference ended without even a symbolic joint declaration really sends a message, not just to Sudanese people, but to the world, that Sudan, despite being labeled by the United Nations as the largest humanitarian crisis in the world right now, is not a priority. The international community had a chance to show unity and commitment to peace, and they missed it. For those of us who are working in the humanitarian space, sorry to interject, it's a clear sign that we're still operating in a vacuum with very little political will to address the root causes of the crisis or even the large-scale humanitarian impact of the war.
Yeah, and how is that deafening silence being treated in Sudan? The Sudanese people must feel abandoned for a war that's often referred to as the forgotten one.
Indeed, people feel abandoned. There's this deep, painful awareness that their suffering isn't seen, that their lives don't carry the same urgency as others. Families are living under airstrikes, siege, hunger, and sexual violence, and yet Sudan rarely makes headlines. And so when they hear terms like forgotten war, it's not just a media label, it's their lived reality. That silence from the world is loud.
We saw nations like Egypt, Saudi, Kenya, the United Arab Emirates all represented at this London summit. No one from Sudan itself. What are the geopolitical sensitivities around trying to bring a resolution to this situation?
Local geopolitics are at the heart of this crisis. And unfortunately, they're also one of the biggest obstacles to peace. When the countries with the most influence in Sudan are also involved in backing different sides, it creates a conflict of interest. Without Sudanese voices at the table, especially civilian and grassroots voices, Sudan's civil society, Sudanese women whose authentic voices are almost always absent from negotiation tables and who are at the center of this crisis. Any peace effort that lacks their voices lacks legitimacy. We cannot resolve this war by talking about Sudan without including Sudanese people.
We heard a spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General earlier this week being very vocal and critical about the flow of arms into Sudan continuing. In your opinion, is it easier to get weapons into the country than aid?
Tragically, yes. Arms are getting in faster than food or medicine. That tells you everything you need to know about the current global priorities. Humanitarian agencies are struggling with access, funding, and security constraints, while weapons seem to move in with absolute ease. It's not just heartbreaking, it's infuriating. The flow of arms is fueling the violence we're trying to respond to with absolutely shrinking resources.
And there does seem to be a feeling of sort of using sticking plaster solutions, the UK and EU pledging more aid, when we've already discussed how difficult it is to get help to the hardest hit areas. And it is heartbreaking, Sara. You know, we're seeing the video that came out earlier this week around the second anniversary, when it's very hard just to even have journalists report on it. You know, no one can get into the region. And maybe the human angle is lost. How distressing is it?
Well, I want to center people in this answer, real people. Viewers might not know this, but nearly half of Sudan's population, about 20 million people, are now facing different forms of hunger. That's the size of the entire population of Melbourne. These are families, children, pregnant women, elderly people, all affected by a war that they had no hand in starting. Yes, access is a challenge. There are areas we simply cannot reach because of ongoing violence or blockages caused by the warring groups. But here's the painful truth. We can barely meet the needs of those we are able to reach. I'm going to speak specifically about projects that I personally manage. Many of the people we can reach, we had to tell that they wouldn't be receiving food anymore, not because of security, but because of funding that was pulled out overnight. When the United States administration issued a stop work order earlier this year, it halted all US-funded humanitarian assistance. That's catastrophic because the US provides over half of the world's humanitarian aid. I had food and nutrition projects that were running, reaching children with life-saving support that we had to suspend with barely any notice. Now imagine being told that your only source of food is gone. Imagine watching your child waste away, knowing the solution exists, but is now out of reach because of a political decision continents away. Yes, we're grateful for the UK and EU pledges, but let's be honest. The UN appealed for $6 billion to reach 21 million Sudanese people, and only about 10% of that has been received. How can we speak of access when we can't even have the resources to act? This is a catastrophe. And if the world doesn't step up, not only will people die, they'll die knowing the world could have helped and didn't.
Just horribly grim. And really, we can only hope that the world continues not to turn a blind eye to the situation there. We really appreciate you putting a spotlight on it, Sara Sinada. Thank you very much.
Thank you.